The end of money. Quote, "Permit me to issue and control the money of a nation, and I care not who makes its laws." End quote. Mayor Amschel Rothschild, who lived from 1744 to 1812. Money is at the intersection of nearly every aspect of modern life. Most of us take the monetary system for granted, but it has a profound and largely misunderstood influence over our lives. Money simply does not work any longer. Originally, it was an abstract concept that was created to allow a more efficient barter exchange between people. The concept today that we can make money from money has been derived essentially from the concept of gambling, creating something from nothing. And what has been deceiving about our accounting standards and financial markets is the concept that money not only does not work, it does not really exist. There is a sheer fantasy behind it all. It can cease to exist in an instant. Thus, we should get rid of it. The sooner the better. The end of money would mark the beginning of a utopian world for the vast majority of people. But what would we do for work in order to acquire the necessary goods to live and put a roof over our heads? What if we were to create a new world without money? How would things get done, and how could society persist? Of course, nothing can be so black and white. There are those with supreme control over the money supply and all the inherent power that goes with it. And of course, they do not want to see it end. Not now or ever. The elite will fight tooth and nail against such a transformation. And they are a formidable enemy when confronted with the elimination of their power. As Lao Tzu observed long ago, the more laws we have, the more crimes we will have. With an equal life and an equal resource system, we will have only one law, that which is best for all life always. Laissez-faire will be the foundation for peace and happiness, and is actually practical for real enlightenment. Simplicity, not a collection of trinkets, brings contentment. Take it from the Greek philosopher Socrates. Quote, "He is richest who is content with the least, for content is the wealth of nature." End quote. We can direct each relationship in a way that is best for all, which in turn will produce in every way a society that is best for all. Once we reject money by understanding the inequality it creates, we will fail to see the world as nations of people. Instead, we will see one people on one planet, all connected and interdependent with each other and all life. Instead of the pursuit of money, let's pledge an allegiance to the earth and all the life that it supports. One planet in our care, irreplaceable, with sustenance and respect for all. We can make this a planet of abundance for everyone, and the first step is to eliminate the class barriers that money creates. What is money anyway? Ask yourself, where does money come from? Where does it go? Who makes it? And what is it based upon? If we could reveal the money magician's secrets, what would we find? If we could look past their smoke and mirror machines, the pulleys, cogs, and wheels that create the grand illusion called money, we would find the most blatant scam in history. It is the worldwide cause of wars, boom-bust cycles, inflation, depression, prosperity for the very few, and too much disparity for all the rest. These days, money is not backed by gold, silver, or anything of real value anymore, simply because there is not enough of these precious commodities to go around. The leaders of the world were convinced 2 centuries ago that eliminating all gold-backed currencies was the only solution to this problem. Then money could be issued via fiat currency. It was impossible, however, for a fiat currency system to coexist with a gold standard system in any country. Though the term fiat is akin to saying the devil's pitchfork to any economist, the original idea behind fiat currency was that it would be backed by the wealth created by the people. The British economist Adam Smith made this point in 1776, right from the beginning in The Wealth of Nations. Quote, "It was not by gold or by silver, but by labor that all the wealth of the world was originally purchased. And its value to those who possess it and who want to exchange it for some new productions is precisely equal to the quantity of labor which it can enable them to purchase or command." End quote. When President Nixon took the US dollar off the gold standard in 1971, the dollar became a fully fiat currency. The dollar was backed by nothing except the promise of the federal government that it was worth something. This action, referred to as the Nixon shock, created the situation in which the United States dollar became the sole backing of currencies and a reserve currency for the member central bank states around the world. If any country does not have a gold-backed currency, they would have an unfair advantage over other nations, which can just create money out of thin air. After all, the people of the world would naturally want to invest in a gold-backed currency over any worthless paper counterpart. Therefore, by maintaining fiat currencies, the powerful only get more powerful while the weak become systematically weaker. Power eventually corrupts, and absolute power eventually corrupts absolutely. Abuses of money. Quote, "I care not what puppet is placed upon the throne of England to rule the empire on which the sun never sets," end quote, boasted Nathan Mayer Rothschild, who by 1820 had established a firm grip on the Bank of England. He continued, quote, "The man who controls Britain's money supply controls the British Empire, and I control the British money supply," end quote. The second Bank of the United States was also chartered by the Rothschilds-owned Bank of England to carry the American war debt. When its charter expired in 1836, President Andrew Jackson refused to renew it, saying a central bank concentrated too much power in the hands of unelected bankers. Thomas Jefferson warned us that there are dangers in allowing a private central bank to create America's currency. He said, quote, "If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks and the corporations which grow up around them will deprive the people of all property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered," end quote. How prophetic are Jefferson's words today, with the overreaching power of the banks, the record number of home foreclosures, and citizens who cannot escape perpetual debt. Between 1923 and 1929, the concentration of wealth at the top of the country's economic ladder was at the highest point in US history. Then the stock market crashed in 1929, followed by the Great Depression, which sent millions of Americans into abject poverty. For decades afterward, the middle class grew within society at a quickened pace. As recently as 1976, America's wealthiest 1% took in only 9% of the country's income. That figure has skyrocketed in the last few decades. Today, America's wealthiest 1% accumulate 24% of all income generated each year. Time magazine, hardly an organization full of liberal extremists, warns that the concentration of wealth has again reached 1929 levels. To illustrate, America's wealthiest 1% own over 40% of the country's total wealth, with the bottom 80% owning a mere 7%. America's wealthiest 1% own 51% of all the country's stocks, bonds, and mutual funds, where the bottom 50% own just 0.5%. It is no wonder the Occupy movement in the fall of 2011 took off like wildfire, exposing the greedy 1% for who they are. The chokehold on wealth distribution has not been this grim since the last depression. Clearly, the current system of wealth distribution in America and around the world is terribly flawed. Powerful investors and financial institutions have abused the use of currency and the whole concept of investment. The system is completely rigged in favor of the elite. Because it is a system based on money, the result is an inadequate social arrangement which produces hunger, poverty, and scarcity. As long as there is the use of money in society, which inevitably spawns the creation of debt and economic insecurity, these conditions will continue to perpetuate crime, lawlessness, and resentment. Control of the Western world. There's nothing new about the concept of a new world order with its aim to control all people through the use of money. The term has been in use since at least 1915, but the idea that a shadowy cabal beyond the reach of rulers and presidents is controlling world events and manipulating the masses is far older. However, the cabal is now much closer to establishing its long-desired one-world government than ever before. In fact, plans are already underway. The original Illuminati, who took great pains to keep their personal identities unknown, were around at least since the 1780s, when they stopped using the name Illuminati. By whatever name their offspring go by today, you can be sure their influence still persists and has only gotten stronger. Their descendants are still on track to create a one-world centrally controlled government and have even been instrumental in fomenting the Communist Revolution, which set the stage for World War II. They now operate through such organizations as the United Nations, the European Union, the Bilderbergs, the Trilateral Commission, and various banking cartels. The original Illuminati were infiltrated and taken over by Jewish bankers in 1782, when the headquarters of illuminated Freemasonry moved to Frankfurt, Germany, a financial center controlled by the Rothschild family. Jews were admitted into the Order of the Freemasons for the first time in Masonic history. If indeed members of the Rothschild family or their close associates were polluted by the occultism of Adam Weishaupt's illuminated Freemasonry, then there is a direct link between the occult and the world of finance. Napoleon Bonaparte recognized the danger and power of the bankers when he observed, quote, "The hand that gives is above the hand that takes. Money has no motherland. Financiers are without patriotism and without decency. Their sole object is gain," end quote. With early information gained on the outcome of the Battle of Waterloo in 1815, Nathan Mayer Rothschild went on to famously bluff traders of the English Stock Exchange that Napoleon had won, and very publicly began to sell his stocks, creating a selling panic in the market. Only hours later, he began to buy huge amounts of shares back when they were pennies on the dollar from the same investors he fooled. It is also suspected that at this time, Nathan Mayer Rothschild took control of the Bank of England, the first privately owned central bank, and used this as a model for a new central banks to be established worldwide. The Rothschild dynasty remains the most dominant banking entity in the world. They have been the wealthiest family in the world for the last 3 centuries. The early Rothschilds soon learned that making loans to governments and kings was more profitable than giving credit to private individuals. Not only were the loans bigger and more interest attached, but they were secured by the nation's taxes. By the 1850s, James Rothschild in France was several times richer than all the other French bankers combined. The Rothschilds were the masterminds behind fractional reserve banking. By the end of the 19th century, one estimate put the Rothschilds' wealth at half of the entire world. In the early 20th century, with the Rothschild investments, J.P. Morgan created an artificial crash so their central bank could be implemented. They succeeded in creating the U.S. Federal Reserve in 1913. Paul Warburg, architect of the Federal Reserve System, was a Rothschild agent. Representing the interests of British aristocracy and Rothschild front bankers such as the Warburgs, Schroders, and Lazards, the Round Table promoted and continues to advance the notion of a new world order based on Freemasonic and Illuminist concepts. The Rothschilds were known to have financed the founder of the Round Table, diamond mining magnate Cecil Rhodes, while he lived in Africa. The Round Table advocated, both then and today, a clear reflection of Illuminist ideas, including the destruction of all national sovereignties and the surrender to an elitist ruling body. The prototype is the high-sounding New World Order, an esoteric theme that inspired the philosophy of occult groups since at least the pre-Masonic Rosicrucians of the 1600s. The Round Table group was patterned, according to Cecil Rhodes, along Masonic lines, with an inner circle of initiates, including Rhodes, Lord Milner, future Prime Minister Arthur Balfour, and Lord Rothschild, whose banking cabal financed and influenced the English Round Table meetings. The modern incarnation is the Committee of 300, which is an international council that dictates the direction of politics, commerce, banking, media, and the military for centralized global efforts. Today, Lord Evelyn Rothschild is the most trusted advisor to Elizabeth, Queen of England. The House of Rothschild, Schiff, Oppenheimer, and Warburg are among the 13 powerful banking families who form the Ring of Power and run the City of London, which are all Crown holdings. Lord Rothschild is the second richest man in the world, with a controlling interest in the 3 leading TV networks, as well as the AP and Reuters news agencies. Follow the money. The flow of money is the flow of power. Dollars are the amoral units of power around the world, used to exploit, impoverish, and enslave others. Dollars are overwhelmingly held by the super rich, who are seemingly unaware of the suffering their indifference to others causes. Some of the super rich have developed altruistic programs and charitable foundations with their wealth. Unfortunately, many of these agencies have been corrupted by greed and the lust for power on the part of individuals within who call the shots and hoard the assets for their own self-interests. The closer a person is to the flow of money, the more that person can divert money into their own pockets. Hence, the incredible wealth of bankers. The further a person is from the flow, the poorer they are. Ideas such as the public good, merit, morality, fairness, justice, and rationality eventually played no part at all in the money flow. Money is entirely a proximity phenomenon, which means the closer you are to its source, to the flow, the better. So the rich ensure they are in closest proximity, while ordinary people find themselves estranged. Those who are furthest of all from the money flow require state handouts, charity, or must beg. In poor countries, they go to sleep every night malnourished or starving. There must be a better way. The elite 1% who control most of the world's assets appear to live in an insulated, rarefied, removed, and amoral domain. They control the laws, so they are rarely prosecuted and are so audacious that they have arranged for their unlimited theft from the public coffers to be declared legal. The bailouts that took place all over the world to save insolvent banks and thus prevent the global economy from collapsing in 2008 were actually criminal acts of theft from the elite to prevent their own from going bankrupt. They caused the financial crisis in the first place, yet the poor picked up the tab. The elite are wealthier now than they have ever been, even though most of them are not even taxpayers. The trend for the super rich is to keep their assets in hidden overseas accounts and renounce their citizenship of any country so they can avoid paying taxes entirely. The elite are largely responsible for the devastating economic situation that is currently gripping the world. While their ill-gotten gains have only increased, the taxpayers are the fools who have been saddled with the debts of the elite. The debt of the nations is now so large that it is impossible to see how it could ever be paid off without catastrophic, value-destroying hyperinflation on the same basis that swept the Third Reich to power in Germany in 1933. The elite have ruined the world for everyone else. By all civilized rule of law, they are criminals. If the money system in which they rely upon were obliterated, it would bring about a radical improvement around the world. Because the elite show no sign of reversing their abusive pattern of hoarding wealth, money should be regarded by the rest of us as a deadly disease that must be eradicated, just as if it were smallpox. Eliminating money altogether is the only way to completely undermine the cabal's authority and power. End the Federal Reserve. The descendants of the Bavarian Illuminati went on to create and control the World Bank and other large financial institutions. It is the World Bank that covertly dictates global oil prices and other commodities. Individual shareholders of the World Bank also control the Federal Reserve banking system. Each Western government has the right to control its own money supply, but few exercise that right, mainly because they've all been compromised by the central bankers. Countries of the world have little choice but to borrow money from the various privately run central banking systems. Through the magic of fractional reserve banking, these central banks can create money out of thin air via the creation of money as debt, then profit on it by charging interest on the loan. The private individuals who control much of the money and resources in the world also wield tremendous control over all Western governments and own the largest mainstream media outlets, which means they can control the message. This private covert empire continues to use the 1 square mile city of London as its center of financial control, with the Vatican City tasked with spiritual control and Washington, D.C. designated the center for military control. All are under the control of a corporate state that is a gigantic business enterprise. The private individuals who control this covert empire are the most powerful individuals in the world because they rule over the monetary system of the world. The Bank of England was the first model for other central banks now operating in nearly every country worldwide. Within these privately owned central banks, the plutocracy is able to control each country where it operates, yet the names of these directors and investors are never revealed. Although this information is a closely guarded secret, there have been enough leaks to confirm the identities of the key banking families who own the Federal Reserve. According to the National Association of Retired Federal Employees, that's NARFE, the Federal Reserve System is, quote, not a federal entity, but a private corporation owned in part by the following: Rothschild Banks of London and Berlin, Lazard Brothers Bank of Paris, Israel Moses Seif Banks of Italy, Warburg Bank of Hamburg and Amsterdam, Chase Manhattan Bank of New York, Kuhn and Loeb Bank of New York, and the Goldman Sachs Bank of New York, end quote. Researchers and CPA Thomas D. Schaff came to almost exactly the same conclusions, adding that 10 banks control all 12 Federal Reserve Bank branches. He names N.M. Rothschild of London, Rothschild Bank of Berlin, Warburg Bank of Hamburg, Warburg Bank of Amsterdam, Lehman Brothers of New York, which no longer exists, Lazard Brothers of Paris, Kuhn and Loeb Bank of New York, Israel Moses Seif Bank of Italy, Goldman Sachs of New York, and JP Morgan Chase Bank of New York. Schaff lists William Rockefeller, Paul Warburg, Jacob Schiff, and James Stillman as the four individuals who own the largest shares of the Federal Reserve. The Schiffs are insiders at Kuhn and Loeb. The Stillmans are Citigroup insiders who married into the Rockefeller clan at the turn of the century. The United States Federal Reserve is not federally operated at all. It is a private corporation of bankers. These bankers volunteered to finance the United States government when it became bankrupt during World War I. Special legislation was then passed to allow these bankers to print paper money, regardless of the fact that only the Treasury is legally allowed to coin its own money. Creating the money would be called a loan by the US government. In turn, the US government agreed to repay this loan by taxing American citizens. At this point, only a fraction of the interest is being paid on the national debt, and none of the principal. These same bankers set the national interest rate and control the economy. Our national debt is the amount owed to these bankers, and our tax dollars line their pockets. The country is literally bankrupt and beholden to the banking oligarchs. But the problem only grows exponentially. It turns out that the Federal Reserve is at the epicenter of a vast, interlocking directorate of companies that earn upwards of 80% of the entire world's wealth. In author David Wilcock's groundbreaking 2012 series of essays, aptly titled Financial Tyranny, Defeating the Greatest Cover-Up of All Time, he reveals a core of 1,318 companies that directly control 20% of the world's wealth. In addition, these corporations also can be linked to owning the stock in a majority of the world's largest companies, which are the majority of the world's largest blue chip and manufacturing firms, whose profits add up to an additional 60% of global revenues. A full 75% of the corporations within this super entity of 147 interlocked companies are financial institutions. They include Barclays Bank, JP Morgan Chase, Merrill Lynch, UBS, Bank of New York, Deutsche Bank, and Goldman Sachs. The director and board members of the 12 Federal Reserve banks are also heading up the top financial institutions. Just 5 banks, JP Morgan, Bank of America, Citigroup, Wells Fargo, and Goldman Sachs Group, together held $8.5 trillion in assets at the end of 2011. That is equal to 56% of the US economy, compared with 43% in 2006, according to central bankers at the Federal Reserve. 5 years after the financial crisis, not a single one of the too big to fail banks is smaller. In fact, they all continue to grow in size and risk. Fractional reserve pyramid scheme. Our current fractional reserve currency system is completely dependent upon more debt in order to grow. It is a statement that many that may sound illogical, but it's factual. If there is less debt in the system itself becomes deflationary and begins to collapse. It is important to reiterate that every single dollar is borrowed into existence, and it is then owed back with interest. Clearly, it's all a scam based on a devious pyramid scheme. We pay tax for the privilege to have currency printed by a private cabal of bankers. Our entire currency system is purely phantasmal. It doesn't really exist. It's just that we are all dreaming the same dream. As soon as we wake up to these abuses, it will be all over for the global bankster cabal. It could start like this. Let's say there was a movement to ensure that all 8th graders or high school seniors or even college freshmen were required to truly understand what fractional reserve banking is, how it operates in the real world, and the toxic consequences of its very practice. Many would begin to question almost everything they have been told their entire lives on the assumption that now they were being told the truth. Clearly, this is not taught to students for a reason. Fractional reserve banking, usually inherently worthless fiat currency, is the most cunning and destructive ruse that has ever been perpetuated upon humankind. Fractional reserve banking as state doctrine is akin to having a system in place whereby all children are born pre-addicted to a potent drug and then kept on that drug for the rest of their lives. The powers that were withdraw it or provide it in excess, depending upon what behavior they want to induce from the populace. Fractional reserve banking allows a handful of people to create a broken-willed herd of debt serfs, and it is extraordinarily efficient. If they can make individuals believe that they are alone and are to blame for their own misfortune because of their lack of intelligence, their inability to create wealth, or their poor work ethic, people will not rise up to overturn the system. Instead of rebelling against the economic system, individuals are manipulated into believing they are helpless and conditioned to blame themselves. This leads to a depressive emotional and mental state, which undermines motivation and inhibits action. And without action, there is no revolution. While the present currency system is what it is, and we have to operate within it for now, it is in our best interest to learn more about how this system of creating currency really works. We can still individually choose to not participate by never taking on debt, that is, excessive or risky debt. If we choose to opt out, it will not feed the system and may possibly lead towards more individual liberty, freedom, and independence. An individual can begin by taking a stand against being a debt serf slave who is beholden to their financial masters. You can be sure this same bankster cabal has plans for our monetary future. The global elite are intentionally collapsing the US dollar and attempting to replace it with a global IMF currency. Several nations, including China and Russia, have proposed replacing the dollar as the world's reserve currency. The 2009 United Nations Trade and Development Report endorsed this solution as well, blaming the current system of currencies and capital rules for the financial and economic crises. The UK newspaper The Telegraph claimed that the report's proposed changes represent the biggest overhaul of the world's monetary system since the Second World War. Not only does the UN suggest a new global currency should replace the dollar, but the Vatican has endorsed this deal as well. Here again are the same perpetrators proposing a lofty sounding faux solution. Sound familiar? The esoteric nature of money. The provocative financial journalist Benjamin Fulford claims the people who run the financial system use an instrument known as a black screen. Fulford describes this as the ultimate high-tech computer network where an enormous sum of money is supposedly hidden. These black screens are part of the same financial system that was created at Bretton Woods, the location where the creation of a fiat currency system occurred. The Bretton Woods Agreement set the methods of management and control over the world of banking. The post-World War II conference also created the International Monetary Fund and the Bank for Reconstruction, now known as the World Bank. There are now quintillions of dollars that they've tried to put into the system. And according to Fulford, that's about 33 orders of magnitude more than there is of money in the real world economy. Fulford notes that this is financially esoteric stuff involving thousands of trillions of dollars. He reminds us of the illusionary aspect of money with this factoid. Quote, "You've got to remember that 95% of the money in the world exists only as numbers in a computer. Only 5% of it exists as cash money," end quote. As a result of Bretton Woods, central banks were forbidden from directly trading with one another. They had to have civilian intermediaries who were actually the bondholders, those investors who kept the equity in their own private accounts. Part of the Bretton Woods Agreement was that these people were supposed to deposit 80% of the yield, although this money was created out of thin air, into humanitarian relief programs, including those at the United Nations. Fulford also says the cabal has obtained something known as the Book of Malkumat. This is a book that details the historical ownership of much of the world's gold by a group of Asian royal families called the Dragon family. They also have copies of the original cash certificates and evidence of how this money was transferred to the custodianship of the United Nations and the United States Federal Reserve for use on behalf of the international community. This evidence is hyperbole for a lawsuit with the potential to prove the private owners of the Federal Reserve Board stole this money and have been using it illegally for over 60 years. In the end, if successful, revealing this technology in all potential lawsuits will clearly illustrate how rotten to the core our current financial system has become. Visualize a world without money. Imagine no banks, no cash, no wages, no bills, and no money of any kind whatsoever. What do you see? Do you imagine everyone going back to primitive barter lifestyles like peasants? Would there be a complete breakdown in society with no laws or social order, where people desperate or too lazy to grow their own food would steal from others to survive? Not if we are all prepared first before money is completely phased out. Think of all the benefits. A deliberate decision to stop using money would make our lives many times better. Just look around at your life as it is today. How free are you? Do you owe any money to anyone or to a bank, credit card debt, college loan, or a mortgage? Certainly you can't ignore these things, because if you did, you might end up losing your home or be cut off from credit. What about your job? Many people only work because they have to, because we all have to pay our bills. If we don't work, the lights will go out, water gets turned off, phones disconnect, and we can't buy food. So you're not really that free at all. Like most people, you probably think this is sadly just a fact of life. But you have to work to make money, to live, just like our parents did. But this is not a fact of life anymore. Bear in mind, we don't really need money itself. We just need the things that money buys for us, such as food, clothing, shelter, electricity, a computer, and so on. Money itself is just a middleman. On its own, it is completely useless. Indeed, it just causes misery to anyone who doesn't have enough of it, which is just about everyone. Chasing the illusion. Let's start with throwing the concepts of society, religion, politics, money, and statues into the trash can. They're all an illusion. But sometimes people don't want to hear the truth because they don't want their illusions destroyed. Like the proverbial fish who doesn't know what water is, we swim in an economy built on money that few of us can comprehend. A look toward the next stage in money's evolution can liberate us from the current grip of centralized and politicized money power. However, what is needed is not another improved money-based system, but specific new design proposals and exchange system structures for local, regional, national, and global financial systems. The new legal tender takes on innovative forms that will be developed to promote local economies in communities around the nation and the world. In the transition, if we are to keep some kind of money or barter system, such as non-monetary exchanges of services, the first thing we need to do is democratize the economy and restore the credit commons, that is, access to necessities available to all based on service credits. Having new roadmaps for healthy money in a healthy world is as vital to our souls as food, air, and water are to our bodies. A new financial system should be based on merit, such as sweat equity or a person's knowledge. When someone creates a good or service, they will have created value or wealth. It is creating something of value or backed by equity with worth, such as real estate, precious metals. Currently, to make money, we lose our health. And then to restore our health, we lose our money. We live as if we are never going to die, and we die as if we never lived. Let us affirm instead that money and commerce could work for our deeper values of justice, caring, community, and preserving the earth. However, since it is routinely abused, it is better in the long run to abolish money as soon as possible. The current system is so monolithic that it's hard to remember money being anything more than just a mirage, like all power. It's hard to remember that the money system is another set of illusions, like advertising and pornography, whose functions are to generate fear and desire and keep us mesmerized, inert, and debilitated by self-doubt. These sets of illusions tell us that our souls feel empty or in pain because we don't yet have this or that, him or her, or that the people who do are somehow superior to us, and that there's something out there you can buy or achieve that will finally stop the fear and aching inside that says you're nothing until you have it. The illusion creates shame if you don't have it, or desire to gain more even if you do have it. Capitalism and greed carry no limitations. The current system has made us feel secondary for being unemployed or underemployed, indebted, disabled, disrespected, and otherwise judged to be inferior in our society if we are anything but rich. These are not just the downtrodden on Skid Row anymore, it's nearly everyone. And if we can stop hating ourselves because the system devalues us, if we can start loving ourselves and each other for exactly who we are, the world would become radically changed and beautifully different. The illusion of inescapable power we suffer under, which makes us enslaved and oppressed, and willing to abuse each other over acquiring money, will simply cease to be. The end of money will be a glorious moment for humanity. Capitalism failures. Capitalism is about growth, progress, and change. Under capitalism, the virtues of ambition, initiative, and competitiveness are praised because those virtues serve the dynamics of capitalism. People are encouraged to always accumulate more and never be satisfied with what they have achieved. Under capitalism, people need to have a bit of liberty, a bit of prosperity, so that the dynamics of capitalism can operate. Without some liberty, ambition cannot be actualized. And without some prosperity, how could accumulation be pursued? Capitalism also needs the best and the brightest, but at what cost? Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and best-selling author Chris Hedges has some interesting insights on the failure of education and capitalism. Quote, "We've bought into the idea that education is about training and success, defined monetarily, rather than learning to think critically and to challenge. We should not forget that the true purpose of education is to make minds, not careers. A culture that does not grasp the vital interplay between morality and power, which mistakes management techniques for wisdom, fails to understand that the measure of a civilization is its compassion, not its speed or ability to consume, condemns itself to death." End quote. It is clear the pursuit of money drives some people to be unethical. It is clear that our capitalistic system, which began so optimistically as a tool for growth, progress, and progressive positive change, has become corrupt and wasteful. Perhaps capitalism is inherently corrupt because it encourages greed and mindless consumption. People struggle to compete with one another to get ahead in the rat race. How much more sensible is the idea of production brigades, producing only what is needed and using only what is sustainable? How much wiser may it be to live within our ration quotas and to accept our assigned duties, whatever they may be, in service to humanity? In this current gradual awakening and regime change, ushering in the post-capitalistic era, we are seeing a conscious orchestration of economics, politics, geopolitics, and mythology as one coordinated consequence of a more aware populace. A whole new reality is being created, a whole new global culture. When it comes down to it, the ability to transform culture is the ultimate form of power. In only a single generation, a new culture becomes the way things are. And people look back at the old ways and find it hard to believe people once lived that way. Let's consider how the bankster royal families might respond to this threat of ongoing regime change. One likely scenario is that the post-capitalistic NWO plan, entrepreneurial virtues will be demonized. This will be important because it could manipulate people into accepting poverty and regimentation. New models to end money. To summarize the current dilemma, in today's modern culture of profit, we do not produce goods based on human needs. We do not build houses based on population needs. We do not grow food to feed people. Industry's major motivation is only profit. The monetary system is currently functioning as an impediment to survival rather than a means of facilitating individual existence and growth. This imaginary tool has outlived its usefulness. What if there were a better way, a path without any money system at all, and the inherent power it provides to only a few individuals? There is no reason for a single person to suffer from malnutrition, let alone our current one in 6 worldwide will go to sleep tonight hungry. Money only has power because we believe it should. If we change our perception of what money represents, then we can change the way we take care of ourselves. After all, money is simply a way of distributing obligations among people. The current faulty monetary construct, which places tragic limitations on Earth's population, should be phased out immediately. It is not money that people need, but the access to goods and services. Since humanity requires resources to exist, the replacement system should provide those resources directly to people without the impediment of selfish financial and political interests. The replacement system is therefore a resource-based economy, as proposed by the think tank called the Venus Project, a comprehensive plan for a sustainable society. This global resource-based economy would be gradually phased in while the monetary system is phased out. It is our birthright to have healthy food, unpolluted water, and fresh air. When the people of the world unite, the current system of control will come crashing down like a house of cards. The veil of secrecy that has controlled the masses of people for millennia is only now being lifted. Until then, as long as a social system uses money or barter, people and nations will seek to maintain positions of differential advantage. If they cannot do so by means of commerce, they will resort to military intervention. This too must be unraveled by the same process of awakened and directed action. A moneyless society would also frown upon a bartering society because bartering is similar to money and can be abused in the same way. In the beginning, money was designed to overcome the need for barter, but did not solve the problem. The true reflection of a moneyless society would encourage an individual's highest passion and excitement in service to others. Specifically, this would be a society based upon an individual seeking a career that seems best suited for them in an organic system where all basic necessities are provided and where routine and mundane tasks are carried out automatically using technology developed by those with passion and excitement for a particular invention. This would allow others to spend more time following their highest passion and excitement, which in turn would increase and speed up the evolution evolutional and spiritual advancement of humanity. Plus, if everything were free and accessible, there would be little incentive to steal or cheat. Moving up in society entirely based on a person's ability is called a meritocracy, where anyone can achieve and advance if they really apply themselves and develop their talents. This used to be the American dream until the forces of wealth and power took over. A moneyless meritocracy will effectively destroy much of the corruption now plaguing the existing system and significantly improve the quality of life for everyone on Earth. This is only a transitional stage to a system in which money will be completely superficial. Another idea in the transition is reissuing a commodity-based currency in which a country's currencies are issued against commodities. These assets, such as wheat, corn, steel, copper, and all other commodities, can be stored in a warehouse and considered as collateral. The gift economy. The gift economy, or the free economy, is a model where people can share their excess goods and acquire items they need. In a gift economy, there is no need to give if it is not possible, because giving or receiving is completely optional. In the spirit of generosity and reuse, a free box has been operating in Telluride, Colorado since 1976. Visitors to the Telluride free box are encouraged to take only what they can use or bring something of value for the next shopper. A flagship-based shop on the Telluride model has opened in Long Beach, California, and new free stores are opening in other cities. The gift economy is alive and global among an improbable network of couch surfers. Since its launch in 2003, the website couchsurfing.org has become an international phenomenon. It has attracted over 2 million registered couch surfers from around the world and facilitated millions of successful guest and host experiences. Free night stays on couches are offered in 230 countries and 74,000 towns and cities. The Burning Man Festival in Nevada operates strictly on the gift economy. Outside vendors are not permitted at Burning Man, except for the organization selling of ice and one central cafe. The success of Burning Man to foster a gift economy amongst participants has the net result of raising the kookiness level of the event, simply by encouraging all to give instead of charge. There is a peculiar response which happens when people become charitable. They become happier. Neuroscientists have located the brain's charity spot, an area at the top and back of the brain that is busier in altruistic individuals. The region of the brain determines whether we put others before ourselves. Science has grappled with why people will put the welfare of others ahead of their own, even at a personal cost. From a standard evolutionary viewpoint, it makes little sense because it does not increase the chances of someone passing on their genes. However, research shows that serving others will boost the immune system. Furthermore, the act of being charitable involves the uppermost portion of the brain, allowing a warm glow that many donors report receiving from the act of giving. Being generous stimulates the same brain mechanisms that evoke pleasurable sensations after sex, eating good food, and using heroin or other euphoric drugs. A leading expert on gratitude, University of California Davis professor Dr. Robert Emmons, finds that people who faithfully cultivate generosity report a host of physical, physiological, and social benefits. Gratitude celebrates the present, blocks negative emotions, and affirms goodness by recognizing external, greater than self factors. People who are grateful have a higher sense of self-worth because they are continually aware that others are looking out for their best interests. It is also gaining the satisfaction of giving simply for the love of sharing. For example, hedge fund billionaire Warren Hellman bequeathed the resources for the Hardly Strictly Bluegrass free concert in San Francisco's Golden Gate Park to continue a decade past his unfortunate passing in December 2011. Who will be remembered more favorably, Warren Hellman or an anonymous billionaire who dialed with a pile of FU money? As we wake up, a more enlightened objective might be not how much you can earn, but if you do make it, how much you can give away. There's no reason to be the richest dead guy in the graveyard. The gift economy will change the current culture of greed and competition to a society focusing on cooperation and sharing, eliminating the need to compete for limited resources. With enough to go around, it would be reasonable to ask every adult to set aside several hours of each working day to contribute something for the common good. All of people's needs would be met and society could then function. Call it a new currency of love. Call it people working together to share and help elevate other people. Selfishness is no longer an operative word when all strive to serve, such as the ultimate lesson taken from the Hermann Hesse novel Journey to the East. The servant is the master. The resource-based economy. A resource-based economy is a social system concerned with the sustainability of human health and our planet. Believe it or not, our planet has plenty of resources to provide for everyone. The only thing we're short of is money. So why not just make everything free? Forget about money altogether. Why not? It's our world, so we can make our own rules. Human conduct should be aligned to how our reality works by recognizing sound scientific principles. All humans really need for a healthy life is clean air, fresh unpolluted water, arable land, fresh food, and adequate shelter. Include technology and mechanization, and we can all enjoy a high standard of living. The real wealth of any nation is measured in its potential and actual resources, plus the development of a more humane way of life. A resource-based economy world uses technology to overcome apparent scarce resources by utilizing renewable and free sources of energy, while people can work towards the elimination of previously perceived scarcity. Technology will also allow computerization and automated manufacturing, inventory, and distribution. The resource-based economy. A resource-based economy is a social system concerned with the sustainability of human health and our planet. Believe it or not, our planet has plenty of resources to provide for everyone. The only thing we're short of is money. So why not just make everything for free? Forget about money altogether. Why not? It's our world, so we can make our own rules. Human conduct should be aligned to how our reality works by recognizing sound scientific principles. All humans really need for a healthy life is clean air, fresh unpolluted water, arable land, fresh food, and adequate shelter. Include technology and mechanization, and we can all enjoy a high standard of living. The real wealth of any nation is measured in its potential and actual resources, plus the development of a more humane way of life. A resource-based economy would use technology to overcome apparent scarce resources by utilizing renewable and free energy sources, while people can work towards the elimination of previously perceived scarcity. Technology will also allow computerized and automated manufacturing, inventory, and distribution. We can use technology to design safe and energy efficient cities. Technology will provide universal health care and relevant education for all. And most of all, technology will generate a new incentive system based on both human and environmental concerns. International economist David Korten, who has set up business schools in low-income countries, proposes that we create real wealth through increased political participation. This can be achieved by basing value on living systems rather than on the money system, by shifting power from global financial markets to local, community-controlled economies, and by expanding the areas of our lives that are based on gift economies, selfless barter, mutual aid, and caring for the greater good. All social systems, regardless of political philosophy, religious beliefs, or social customs, ultimately depend upon natural resources, that is, living systems rather than a money system. The human aspect must be of prime concern to any future society with technology subordinate to this goal. This would result in a considerable increase in leisure time for all. We can hearken back to emulate the ancient Greeks, who considered daily discussions of philosophy and exercise on the beach as among the highest callings. In a modern economy where production is accomplished primarily by computers or machines, and products and services are available to all, the concepts of work and earning a living will become irrelevant. A community that extols the splendor of sharing also cooperates more, which leads to less crime, conflict, and inequalities. It also makes individuals feel better about themselves and other people. Cybernation, or the application of computers and automation to the social system, could be regarded as an emancipation proclamation for humankind if used humanely and intelligently. No longer will people have to toil away at jobs they hate. Its thorough application could eventually enable people to have the highest conceivable standard of living with practically no labor. A resource-based economy could free people for the first time in human history from a highly structured and outwardly imposed routine of repetitive and mundane activity. It could enable us to return to the Greek concept of leisure, where slaves did most of the work and men had time to cultivate their minds. However, in the future, each of us will command more than 1 million slaves, but they will be mechanical and electrical slaves, never again our fellow human beings. A resource-based economy, by definition, includes the necessary participation of all people to share in its benefits. Plus, there are some things that money just cannot buy, such as manners, morals, intelligence, or as the Beatles suggested, love. In a monetary system, there is an inherent reason for corruption, and that is to gain a competitive advantage over someone else. Without vested interests or the use of money, there is no benefit in falsifying information or taking advantage of anyone. There would be no need for any underlying rigid social barriers that would limit the participation of anyone or restrain the introduction of new ideas. Truth would never be withheld, not even from children. The main objective would be the access of information and the availability of goods and services to all people. Without greed or competition, people would be far better prepared to participate in the exciting challenges of this new society. Learning would become a lifelong pursuit. If overpopulation became a burden, trained personnel could volunteer to colonize other Earth-like planets or even a terraformed Mars. The method for the distribution of goods and services without the use of money or tokens could be accomplished through the establishment of distribution centers, which would be similar to a public library or an exposition, where the advantages of new products would be explained and demonstrated. With the infusion of a resource-based economy, we will soon have new, clean, and free energy sources in unlimited quantity that will serve civilization for many thousands of years. It cannot be stressed enough that it is not money that people need, but rather it is freedom of access to most of their necessities without having to appeal to a government bureaucracy or any other agency. Just walk right up and get anything you need at any time. In a resource-based economy, money is completely irrelevant. All that would be required are the resources, manufacturing, and distribution of needed products. Into the space age. With today's technology, just about everything we produce for ourselves is done by machines or computers. This is one reason we have high unemployment everywhere, because machines have taken over so many jobs. But maybe this is a good thing. After all, technology can completely free us from hard labor. So we should be grateful. If we don't need people to produce the stuff we consume, then surely the producing is easy. And if producing stuff is easy, then there's absolutely no reason we shouldn't be doing it for everybody, not just the ones who can pay. Think about how much less waste there would be. At the moment, our economy is all about making money around and making a profit. Moving money around and making a profit. It has nothing to do with actually providing for the people of the world what they need. The only constraint to producing the goods we need should be what's physically possible, not what's affordable. The only thing money creates is terrible inequality, a scoring system for humanity that decides who gets what, and most people end up with the short end of the stick. For the first time in history, our technology allows us to do away with this notion of haves and have-nots, but that's only the beginning. Making our world money-free would unleash our full technological potential and allow us to tap into revolutionary clean and free energy sources. It would bring meaningful prosperity and knowledge all across the world, and it would even put an end to war and injustice forever. Our world will be much better without money. Just imagine food produced to the highest standards in plentiful supply. Starvation would be completely wiped out forever. We could have bigger and better hospitals and schools without any budgetary problems. There would be abundant energy, easy communication, space exploration, and underwater cities available to everyone. All of this would facilitate a peaceful transition toward meaningful contact with benevolent entities of other worlds. Sound too utopian? What about UFOs or time travel? Legendary screenwriter Gene Roddenberry was supposedly inspired by seance sessions foretelling future worlds, including on Earth. There is no episode in the Star Trek series where the use of money is seen. Just speak out loud what it is that you desire, and out it comes. No tokens, credit cards, or money in any form is ever used in the entire Star Trek franchise of TV shows or movies. Take away costs, and the only limit is our imagination and the raw materials needed to make whatever we want. In today's society, if you don't have money, basically you die. This is not just wrong, but completely immoral, simply because it's unnecessary. There is another way, a new way, a better world without money, where everything is free, where you are free, where we can provide for everyone and finally see an end to malnutrition, poverty, and all social injustices. This will be the golden age on Earth. We can live in a world where society is as fair as it possibly can be, and where technology is unhindered by costs, so advanced that we would hardly recognize ourselves in a generation or two. It's all possible right now if we choose a money-free future for our children and for the sake of our planet. Exploitation of everything would end. 4 principles. Every animal species takes care of its own, except, oddly, the human species. This has to change if we are meant to reach our fabled utopia. Every enlightened society is able to provide basic care for all its citizens. No one falls through the cracks ever again. This is not only doable, but absolutely necessary for our collective advancement. However, in creating an egalitarian new world without money, we have to define our terms. The first principle is that no human will have to go hungry ever again. The weakest link is always a barometer for the best and the worst potential of the entire population. The second principle is that everyone should be given free access to the basic necessities such as shelter, electricity, clean water, nutritious food, and adequate health care. The third, which we already have, is the right to a basic education, but the learning process can continue for a lifetime, and higher education is also free. In this utopian unified theory model, all people would participate in the laws of consistency, which allows for each upcoming generation to receive all the new information gathered when it becomes known, and then they can improve upon it as matured adults and continue to make new breakthroughs. Nothing is ever withheld from anybody in the age of transparency, and every asset that is available to one is available to all. Lastly, the fourth principle is that our educational system becomes completely uncorrupted and geared towards universal truths. As such, we'll see the introduction of personal holographic technology and lessons geared to teaching people meaningful spirituality on a macro and individual basis. All will voluntarily seek inner peace, their peace with others and peace with the natural world. In this enlightened society, children from an early age will be taught tasks that are useful to a free energy, resource-based society. After receiving a high school education, each individual is given an aptitude test. If a person does not wish to continue on to college, they are given the choice of any labor-related job or no job at all. If they want to sit in their dorm room and play video games all day, that's fine. Everybody chooses for themselves what they aspire to do with their life. Those who wish to extend the free education into specific professions may do so, but they must prove their aptitude at different levels to continue. When adults leave school, they know that they are required to donate part of their day to the career that they have chosen in service to others. The person who loves animals will go to work at a ranch, just as the woman with an aptitude for science will enjoy going to the laboratory on her work days. Work is no longer a chore, but a personally rewarding experience, as everyone knows that the fruit of their labor contributes in a small way towards everyone's benefit. When people perform their tasks at an optimum level, they are given rewards, and as their education and experience has taught them, these will not necessarily be material. Those who do not strive for personal perfection or who are handicapped will always have their essential needs provided. Those who decide to help in service to others and advance civilization will be rewarded in ways they prefer as the most fulfilling. In a new world without money, we must develop new ethics that will not allow anyone to be abandoned, no matter what their circumstances, have all their basic necessities met, and even provide spiritual training. In the end, such a system will elevate every person and preserve the planet for future generations, growing up in an ever dynamic utopian society.